Welcome back, guys. This is part 2 with David Rames from Midea. Now, on this episode here, just quickly, he walks us through a case study that they did in partnership with the Discovery Channel up in Alaska. And just they installed heat pumps, and the report back is they're working just fine. So stay tuned on the case study that David's about to lay out for us, guys. This is the HVAC Not All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCreadie. As an HVAC contractor, we need to be insured, and it makes a lot of sense to have the same insurance company look after all our needs. Lambert Insurance Services has been protecting HVAC contractors since 2009. From general liability to workers' comp, bonding, commercial auto, and more, they've got you covered. Call Lambert Insurance Services for a free quote at 801-937-7030. Since you brought up the fact that you can send updates to the controller, it's funny because every time I talk about a Wi-Fi stat or something that connects, I always get someone jumping in going, what, so the government can turn off my unit whenever they want? I'm like, well, and I laugh because it doesn't work like that. There's been a lot of, I guess, utility programs that are opt-in where they can change the temperature of your system if there's a high demand for power in the area. There are programs like that, but I wanted to bring that up and clarify that these are opt-in systems. These are opt-in programs, and you must opt in and give them permission to do this. And the reason I know about this is because at one point, the utility here, this is going back a long time ago, they were giving out free Wi-Fi stats, right? And they were advertising it, and it was like in the fine print. Basically, you have to opt in, and they can change the temperature of your, change your set point in high demand or peak power consumption times, right? And that, I just wanted to clarify that. Have you heard of those programs, David?
Yeah, of course. And so, I'm on one at my house as well. So demand response, right? Or what some want to call grid flexibility. So during peak times, if you opt into it, and the way that I look at it is if you've got both people in your house are working and your kids are at school and they need to, if you opt in and they want to change, set your temperature up a little bit, at 2:00 on a Tuesday, it's not going to hurt you, right? Because normally that program is over. That's the peak time and your house will go back. But again, it is optional. Now, those are tests that we have to pass, right? We have to make sure that our communicated wall control can take a demand response signal and adjust the compressor speed. I think the last one we did, it adjusted the compressor speed down to 70%, right? In order to be able to take a little stress off of the grid. But as of now, it's an optional program. Eventually, will that end up being mandatory? I have no idea, but that's government based and they've done some funky things. But let's hope they've got some bigger concerns to worry about than tapping into your HVAC system and trying to control it.
Well, I mean, for an HVAC tech, they can just pull the thermostat off the wall and jump R to Y or R to W and get their system back up and running. So the technicians in the field that know how it works don't have any issues when it comes to that. Okay, so I did promise that we'd get to how we overcome the grandpa's heat pump and how we heat in these cold climates and the technology behind it. I've noticed that a lot of these outdoor units, they're super, super heavy. I don't know if that has anything to do with it because the coils have more capacity. I know there's vapor injection in compressors now, and it could be a multifaceted thing, right? So take us through how these things heat in such cold temperatures these days.
Yeah, so, at Midea, we're lucky enough through Midea Group. We also, not only do we own Midea Residential Air Conditioning, but we also own GMCC Compressor Company. And so basically our sister company is our compressor manufacturer. So when we have things that we want done or technology that we need, and most of the time this is done through some enhanced, heat transfer, we do, and everything we do as an inverter compressor, right? So we do implement some of the enhanced vapor injection, and then we kind of take it a step further to sort of a sequential stage. Through that refrigeration cycle and through the compressor, it allows us to kind of inject some vapor into there to where we can keep the compressor cooler, right? And then we can transfer more of that temperature Even at, like, when we did the Department of Energy Cold Climate Heat Pump Technology Challenge, the story behind that is, quickly, the US DOE challenged the major manufacturers to do better in very cold climates. And so there were 10 manufacturers that jumped in this thing. We, of course, were one of them. And in that, there were 2 tests that you had to pass. One was you had to be 100% heating at 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And we went down to UL Labs in Plano, Texas. And that's sort of, and you know this, that's sort of old news now, being 100% 5F. And then there was a second test that wasn't mandatory, it was optional. And that was, what is your heating capacity at negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit? And so we ran through that, and we got a call and said, hey, your tests are done. You want to know the results? And we said, absolutely. And they said, well, you guys were 118% of your rated heating capacity at negative 15 Fahrenheit. So wow. The work that we did through our sister company in GNCC Compressors allows us, and it's crazy to think that negative 15 Fahrenheit, there's still enough heat outside to transfer inside. That is, we kind of manipulate the sequential stage on the compressor and the refrigeration cycle. We actually can still pull enough heat from outside of negative 15F to move it inside to keep people comfortable. So it was a pretty cool test. It was a stress test. We passed with flying colors, and we're super happy about the performance.
The weight of these things, why are they so heavy as compared to a traditional condensing unit? So
on most systems, everything we do, it is horizontal discharge, right? And so we feel like with a horizontal discharge, more of like a ductless look on the outdoor unit. Mm-hmm. And with the power of the GNCC compressor that we put in there, we don't have to continuously make this condenser coil massive, right? And so in my past life, as the efficiencies and the heat output got bigger, and I was with a brand that had a vertical discharge unit, and I would have customers stand on their tiptoes and look in the top of it and say, why is this thing so big? Because there's nothing in there. And I said, it's not really about what's in there. It's about what's around the outside of it, right? So increasing the size of that condenser coil to get higher efficiency and higher temperature transfer, that copper aluminum coil is heavy. And then you've got more casing, more cabinet around it, so it does get heavy. But we put the innovation into the compressor. So as of right now, only our 5-ton extreme heat is a double fan. So everything else is small and compact. So we're going to take up a lot less of your yard or your social space by keeping these things as small as possible because of the power and the innovation of the compressor that we've got in it.
Did you say Alaska? Was it Alaska? Okay, so you did a case study there. You want to maybe take us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were coming out with our cold climate heat pump product, we were looking to stress test, right? And I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. It gets a little cold here, but by no means is this a stress test. So we looked around and said, how do we stress this thing and just put it to its max? And so we actually teamed up with the Discovery Channel, and they helped us to find a case study up in Willow, Alaska. And so the last October, we were in Willow, Alaska, and we found a group that it's called Willow Ranch. And so there were 4 special needs men who ran this ranch, and they had a duplex they lived in, and they were heating this duplex with some Toyotomi heaters using diesel fuel, right? So they had this heater sitting there in the middle of the living room, and it was keeping the living room warm, but you got bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens on the exterior. And it was just really cold. So we said, that's a perfect opportunity for us in Willow, Alaska, which is extremely cold. So we came in, and what's important about this, the first thing we did was we improved the envelope, right? And so windows, doors, insulation, new ductwork, insulating that ductwork into crawl space. That was the first step. And as you know, it's a super important step. If you can improve your envelope of your home first, that will help immensely. So we did all of that, and then we put in, because it's a duplex, we put in 2 Midea G-Cube extreme heat pump systems, new ductwork, and in the end of that, they were amazed. And it was, when I was up there, it was in Alaska's beautiful. It's incredible. When we were up there, it was somewhere around 3 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit when we finished. and we kicked that thing on, and we got that space up to about 72 Fahrenheit in no time. They've gone through one dreadful Alaskan winter already, and they're going into number two. And we've passed with flying colors, which proves even at these extreme cold temperatures, we can pull that heat from outside and move it inside and stay off of that auxiliary heater. And so to this day, after 1.5 hard winters, we're doing very well up there.
So in that particular system, is there auxiliary heat? Is there backup heat of any kind?
What we ended up doing, which was pretty incredible, and we didn't even, we kind of had to shuffle on the fly. We were going to put auxiliary heaters in there, and then we found out that panel box in it didn't have enough. So we ended up tying in a hydronic coil as our auxiliary heater. And if they need it, and they need that, we've got the hydronic coil is actually the auxiliary heater, but there is no electrical backup in this thing. And so we just can, if there's a need for it, it just sends a signal and it kicks on the hydronic side of things. But so far, the heat pump has been doing phenomenally up there. We stay in contact with them, and it's done a wonderful job.
I'm glad you brought up the building envelope thing, because I was on a call yesterday, and this is really important for people to understand. There's the mechanical side and the building envelope side. The call that I was on yesterday, it's a 2-story apartment building, really old. It doesn't have ventilation in it. So if people are cooking, there's no way to get rid of the humidity or anything like that. It's a really old building, and the indoor air quality in that place is probably not the greatest at all because, as I said, there's no ventilation. But it's got radiators and boilers, and the radiators were hot. The boilers were at temperature, but there was pockets of the building in tenant spaces where it was cold in certain rooms. And I'm like, you know what? I just had a podcast about thermal imaging with Brent Lemert from Testo. And I grabbed my Testo thermal imager and I went into the spaces, and I'm scanning the walls, and certain parts of the walls were 64 degrees Fahrenheit and they're actually sweating. This is how old and how bad the building envelope was. And I'm showing them, like, I'm saying, it's not the boiler, it's not the rads. The rads are at temperature, but look at these walls. You got hot spots and cold spots, and you can actually touch portions of the wall and it's cold to the touch. You're like, wow. So it's really good to understand. I'm glad you brought that up. It's good to understand there's a mechanical side and a building envelope side. And really, in order to get that optimal comfort, both sides need to be looked at, and both sides need to have the correct implementation, whether it's windows, insulation, doors, and then load calcs and the correct size equipment on the other side. So I'm glad.
So if you work on that envelope and you put a little bit of money in improving that envelope, if you think about it, that's going to drastically decrease the heating load, or the loads on these. And then maybe you can get some of that money back, because if you think you need a 4-ton and then you increase the building envelope through insulation, windows and doors and that kind of thing, you can get some of that money because maybe your load drops down to a 3-ton instead of a 4-ton, right? And so we just want to make sure that we minimize that heat loss and heat gain. And then that's where you truly find the ultimate comfort. And then we let the equipment do what it does, because now it's in a very sealed off and insulated and tight space. And then it does what it does, and everybody maximizes their comfort.
Cool. Okay. So in a couple of minutes, I want to ask you about some maybe install pointers that gives the technician some tips on best practice of install. It could be your equipment, could be generalized heat pump equipment. But I do want to bring something up that I think is it's not profound or anything like that, but I'm going to throw a dirty word at you. The dirty word is Mitsubishi. And the reason that I'm throwing that word at you is because for many years, they were ahead of the game when it came to heat pump and ductless and stuff like that. But what I'm noticing now is that manufacturers like Midea and other ones, the technology is catching up, and it's caught up. It's almost equalized across the board. And there are people that are starting to move away from Mitsubishi because of their high price tag, and moving to something like a Midea because it does have a lower price tag, but the ingenuity and the engineering and the quality and how it runs is equalized to Mitsubishi. Do you want to maybe talk about how other manufacturers and yourself like Midea have caught up to that over the last couple of decades, maybe.
Yeah, and you're right with the Mitsubishi, and listen, it's a great product. I mean, it is a great, powerful product. Again, from our side, we do things just a little bit differently, right? So we just want to make sure we've got a group of engineers and experts from across the world that are awesome at their jobs. And I consider it flattering when I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And trust me, Gary, I'm the dumbest guy in the room a lot of times. But
hey, my hand is always up too, David. My hand's always up asking questions.
It's okay. Again, it's flattering. And I know we built a great team when I'm the dumbest guy in the room. But you're right. We never sit on our hands. And we never say, okay, enough's enough, right? And a funny story was when we released that Midea EVOC system a couple of years ago, and we just released it. It just became for sale. And I was sitting in our research and development call, and my big boss said, okay, what's next? And I'm like, man, I said, we just now got to come off of a 2-year development plan. We're ready to launch this thing. And he said, it doesn't matter. What's next? And so constantly within Midea being challenged of what's next, and you never sit and you never stop thinking and innovating and performing. And the one thing we'll do, to the point you made, is I came up with this cheesy little marketing phrase. We want to be easy to afford, easy to install, and easy to enjoy from the consumer, right? So we kind of took this and said, we know extreme heat, and we know inverter compressors, and we know communicating controls, for the most part, with a lot of brands, are way more expensive. So when we're on calls with a lot of the groups and the advocate groups and all of that, one call specifically, it was over, and she said, can you hold on the call after everybody's off? I said, absolutely. And she said, thank you guys for what you're doing, because this technology for many manufacturers is so expensive. 1% of the people can afford it, okay? So what you're doing is you're trying, without ever sacrificing quality or performance, you're trying to make this technology more affordable for everyone. And you really can't make an impact with a variable speed compressor, right? So minimizing or at least controlling our voltage, right? And so we're not either on or off 100% or zero. It's almost like the cruise control on a car, right? I mean, you can go 5 or you can go 75 or anywhere in between. That's what we want to do. So we continue to work on how do we minimize the cost, but keep the comfort and the performance and the efficiency high and the reliability. But we'll never sacrifice any of those to try to hit a price point. But we too want to try to make as big an impact as possible.
Awesome. Cool. Maybe we can end this off with some install tips for the technicians out there. It doesn't have to be anything crazy or in depth, but just some things that might help them get through an install a little easier and will be optimized for years to come afterwards. So we minimize any sort of callbacks or anything like that.
Right. So a couple of things that come to mind is one is, like we talked about earlier, let's make sure that the envelope of the home is the way it's supposed to be. And two, as you're doing this, as you know, Gary, nitrogen is so important. Whether that's because, hey, this line set is running through a finished basement and through a finished wall, and I can't tear it out. And my house was the same way. I got a finished basement, and it was above a finished ceiling. And so we had to reuse the line set, which is not a big deal. You just make sure that you flush it and you use nitrogen and you keep that thing clean, because anything that remains in that line is going to cause you trouble later. So take your time, nitrogen purge, vacuum, and make sure you don't have any leaks. As we know through contractors, callbacks are the death of contractors.
100%.
And so take your time and spend the time for a quality install. Don't get in a hurry. And what you'll find out is not only will the system run better, more efficient, and more powerful, but they may be a while before you see these guys again because you don't have the callbacks.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, callbacks are not good for contractors. And this is where it comes from the top down. Shit rolls downhill. Everybody knows that. But there are service managers and bosses, and they want their technician, oh, you got to get out of there. You got to get out of that install. I'm losing money right now because you're still there. That mentality, it has to change, because if that technician needs another 2 hours on that install or another 3 just to do it right, and it prevents a year down the line coming back and spending a day there changing a compressor or something like that, wouldn't you want them to spend the extra 3 hours, pay them whatever it is, rather than having to come back for a day taking a guy off the road for a day, losing money of them doing other service calls, and then having to fork out a pocket to pay your guy to go back and do a warranty call. It just makes more sense.
It just goes back to the old saying, well, why is there time to do it twice when there wasn't enough time to do it right the first time, right? And so when you have to go back on a call because of an improper installation and you got in a hurry, you can't charge for it. I mean, it was your fault. And the labor rates, as everyone knows, they're not getting any cheaper. And so you got to pay a guy or two guys to go back out and to figure this out, when you just should have done it right to begin with. And one thing I'll top our new Midea E-Box GQ real quick is with this modular air handler, we can actually break it down into 3 pieces through this block and lock and latch. It's super quick. So rickety old ad steps or whatever, 3 pieces, we tightened at 30 seconds a piece, right? And this air handler is up through the rickety attic steps and horizontal in the attic in no time. So everything we try to put from an innovation perspective will also help on the labor side, right? So when we think about having the contractor's best interest in mind, how do we make this thing easier to install? And we see a lot of attic installs or crawl spaces or basements or tight spots or whatever. Break this thing down in a couple minutes into 3 pieces, haul it in, latch it back together. And then maybe if we save you time on that, then you'll have more time for a nitrogen purge, or you can actually spend some good time, pulling a vacuum on this thing. And contractors should find ways, because you got to pull this vacuum, do that, and then go work on some other things, right? While this thing's pulling vacuum, to try to maximize what you can get done in the minimum amount of time that you have to do it. And there's keys to success.
Awesome. Cool. All right. This conversation's been great, David. So I appreciate it. Will you be at AHR by any chance?
We will be at AHR. We love it. We'll have a huge booth. We'll be showing off all of the new technology, all of all the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into this stuff. So I do ask folks, come by. We'll put on a show for you. You can kick the tires on our stuff and learn more about it if you need to.
So the audience knows, and if everything works out, as long as Ben doesn't get the flu during AHR, but Ben Reed, who I work with closely, he does my newsletter, my website stuff. He's going to be coming down to AHR, and he's actually coming to the Midea booth to make some content that we're going to put out online. I think once he gets down there and puts his content together and it gets out onto social media, I think some of what you guys are doing will be shown in a visual form, which I believe will be the real way to get this information out. So he'll be down there. Will you be there yourself personally, David?
I'll be there myself. I'll be bouncing around to, I get the joy of talking to trade schools and that while we're there, which is so much fun to help to build up this next generation that's coming through. As we're losing some of the old school guys, which we hate, we got to make this industry exciting again. And so I get to talk to a lot of kids and a lot of trade schools. And we donate a lot of equipment to trade schools because we know funding is tight there. We just want to make sure that younger and the next generation get excited about it. So I'll be bouncing around to a lot of different meetings, but I'll be in the booth. I'd love to see you guys and to show off a lot of things we've been working on.
Awesome. I'll tell Ben to come say hi to you.
Please do.